What's going on, everybody? Dave Loughran here on the NBA Injury Report, along with Greg Ehrenberg. I'm filling in for your boy Adam Scher, who's down there in Nashville for the DraftKings Live Final. We got some big spots today to touch on. We're going to get into all of them. And if you have any questions or comments on other spots, leave it down below in the comments, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Hit that thumbs up, subscribe before we dive into this, and be sure to go over and download the FanUp app, whether it's the Google Play Store, the App Store, whatever it is, and sign up using the promo code Awesemo, which will get you $25 and 2,000 free points, which are equivalent of $20. Zero reason not to check it out. FanUp, sponsor of the NBA Injury Report. Greg, what's good, man? You got some Pelicans action today, a bunch of big spots there.
Yeah, it's a 10-game slate, and there's a lot of insignificant players on the injury report, but also a lot of pretty key ones. The one that you mentioned right there, CJ McCollum, he's now in the health and safety protocol. That's the big Pelicans news. You know, there's other guys out as well. Brandon Ingram, although he's been out for an extended period of time. CJ McCollum, who's mainly out to screw over my best ball teams, because that's what I found as I get deeper into the best ball playoffs. Anybody that my teams are relying on immediately goes down, miss a game. Luka missing a game over the weekend, the game where Jokic sat on the tail end of back-to-back. Now McCollum in the health and safety protocols. But this opens up a whole bunch of value on the New Orleans Pelicans, because without McCollum and without Ingram in the mix, there just isn't that much. Well, there aren't that many guys who take up the usage. There aren't shot makers here. So Devontae Graham, who's been coming off the bench and playing an extended role in recent games, I assume he's going to start, and probably him and Valanciunas lead the team in usage. So Valanciunas in the front court, we've seen his price come down on both FanDuel and DraftKings. He's one of my favorite center options. Devontae Graham is a great backcourt play. And then we kind of have to see how the rest of the starting lineup shakes out. But even as lower priority options, guys like Jose Alvarado, Najee Marshall, I assume that they're going to play extended minutes. There's also going to be extra production going to Herb Jones and Jackson Hayes. I hate to just throw out this entire team, but the reality is that almost all my lineups are going to have multiple players from the Pelicans tonight, because there's so much value here. Basically, everybody in the rotation is a good points per dollar play. But the highest priorities for me are going to be Devontae Graham and Valanciunas.
Yeah, and another thing, too, is when you look at this lineup, you could get Tony Snell's, 0.003 fantasy points per minute. I think that's fine if you have a McCollum or an Ingram in the lineup, like we saw the other day with McCollum. But the problem I have here, and you kind of alluded to it, is do you start Tony Snell, which gives you Devontae Graham, Tony Snell, Herbert Jones, Jackson Hayes, and Jonas Valanciunas? Or do you throw an Alvarado in there? Do you throw a Najee Marshall in there and get Snell off of the bench, because Snell offensively is a black hole?
I still think he starts just because he's been starting recently, and I don't see them changing it up. But that's actually probably going to be a good thing for the fantasy value of some of these other guys. So let's assume Devontae Graham is in the starting lineup, which I think is going to be the case. There's just extra usage to go to him, because, like you said, Tony Snell, he's a zero on offense. He's not going to take shots. He's not going to do anything but run up and down the court, play some defense. So that's going to be another added benefit to some of the value here. Tony Snell is actually one of the only guys that's going to be in the rotation that I'm not really considering for DFS purposes, but it does help some of the other guys that we do like.
Yeah, and I think if Snell's not in the lineup, you have to talk about what it does for Devontae Graham as well. Does it hurt Graham? I mean, he's still someone who has like a 26% usage rate with both of those two guards off the floor, or Ingram and McCollum off the floor. But if it's Alvarado or Marshall, you're still playing Devontae Graham. But I agree with you that Tony Snell as a starter is going to pretty much just boost everybody else's value, because he's essentially non-existent from an offensive perspective. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, and to answer your question, it would mean I probably end up projecting Devontae Graham for like one or two less fantasy points, but ultimately it wouldn't mean that he's not a good value. So I'm going to be getting to him no matter what.
Yeah, it makes no difference whatsoever. I will say, though, this Dallas team is interesting. I got a little bit on a Luka triple-double today. I was looking at all of his other props, and everything is 9.5 rebounds, 9.5 assists, 32.5 points, Greg. So I figure, give me a triple-double here, because if this game stays close and Houston's actually been playing tight at home in recent spots, maybe Luka gets there. But he's got this game without Jalen Brunson today. Dorian Finney-Smith, not to say that makes a difference from Luka, but what does it do for Spencer Dinwiddie now that Brunson's out? And what does it do for like a Josh Green or a Kleba with DFS out?
Sure. So we saw a couple games last week where Spencer Dinwiddie ended up entering the starting lineup for the Dallas Mavericks. In those games, he scored 31.75 DraftKings points and 47.5 DraftKings points. He didn't really have a good go of it when he was in Washington, but they were so conservative with him coming back from a torn ACL where he wasn't playing on back-to-backs. He was playing a lot of limited minutes. And that just hasn't been the case now that he's in Dallas. 2 games ago, he played over 40 minutes. So this is a team much more willing to let him go out there and play big minutes, take on a bigger role. Also, 3 games ago, he had a 41% usage rate. So I think Spencer Dinwiddie, the primary beneficiary from Jalen Brunson not being out there. I think we're going to see Dinwiddie move into the starting lineup. He's a great option. And then in the front court, like you said, with no Dorian Finney-Smith, I think this shores up the minutes for Maxi Kleber in a really positive matchup. And he's cheap on both FanDuel and DraftKings. So it's not that we look at Maxi and think of him as a great points per minute fantasy producer, but at a sub 4K price where he's probably going to play 30 plus minutes as long as he doesn't get into foul trouble, he still becomes a really good value play. Ultimately, what this slate's going to come down to, though, is we have to compare the value plays to all the value that's going to be on the New Orleans Pelicans. So you mentioned Josh Green, and I think he could play extended minutes. So could Reggie Bullock. Ultimately, though, these guys are just low priority plays because they're not nearly as good as the cheap plays from New Orleans.
In this same game on the other side, Christian Wood didn't go through shoot around. It's definitely possible that he's sidelined again with this illness today. Dennis Schroeder and Jayshawn Tate are kind of just secondary obstacles here. But when it comes to Şengün, this guy's coming off a huge game, and it wasn't what was startling to me, really encouraging, if anything, wasn't just that he had a big game, but it was the fact that he played 35 minutes in regulation, 40 minutes in overtime against the Lakers. Now, is it to say that we're going to get the same run from him? Maybe not, but we know that Stephen Silas had looked to limit him throughout the entire season, like actively said that. Played 30 minutes and then 35 minutes. What do we do with Şengün now that he's seen a price hike, at least specifically on DraftKings, if Christian Wood sits again?
Play him and play a lot of him because he's such a good fantasy producer overall for the season. It's just been a concern of, well, is he going to get on the court or not? Because there's been games, mostly when Christian Wood has been active, although even times when they still had Daniel Tice and they didn't have Christian Wood for some games, they would start Tice, and then Şengün would be a chalk play, would play like 13 minutes off the bench. We're now at a point in the Houston Rockets season where they're not going anywhere. I think we've known that all along, but now it's just really been confirmed at this point. And I think they feel a little more comfortable giving Şengün the bigger minutes as the season's rolled along. So like you said, last 2 games, 40 minutes and 30 minutes, both in starts. So just to be conservative with his playing time, I think it's reasonable to project him for around 30. But He's such a good points per minute fantasy producer that we'd still be looking at close to, 40 fantasy points in a matchup against Dallas in that kind of situation. So as long as Christian Wood is out, Şengün's still a really good play, even though his price has gone up a little bit from where it was last game.
And the last one to throw out here is Jimmy. We hit on most of the big stuff here. Jimmy Butler, questionable for this one. Greg, this would look a lot different if this were, a week ago where Kyle Lowry was still out and Victor Oladipo hadn't re-entered the rotation. But Oladipo, limited minutes once again, understandable, but he's still there. And then you've got Caleb Martin's questionable, but you have Kyle Lowry who is back. So if Jimmy Butler's out, what does it do for the rest of this team?
Yeah, so first of all, Jimmy Butler is just an ongoing part of it. He's like the third person on this show because he's on the injury report almost every single day. I make fun of him all the time, and you didn't even know about that, and you still end up bringing up Jimmy Butler here because
I had to, because he did miss last game, right? So if he didn't, I wouldn't have even mentioned him.
Yeah, devastating sinus infection, and of course he had the terrible toe infection a week ago that also caused him to miss time. But if you do look at this team with Jimmy Butler off the court, there's a pretty clear benefactor in Bam Adebayo this year with Butler off the court. Bam Adebayo, 26% usage rate, scores 48 DraftKings points per 36 minutes. We also see a pretty big bump go to Tyler Hero, but it's kind of hard to project him for all the minutes I would like to, just because Kyle Lowry, like you said, he's back. And Lowry's missed so much time due to family issues, personal matters, whatever it was that kept him out for almost all of January, and also forced him to miss time again a couple of weeks ago. When he's back in the picture, there just isn't quite the same amount of playing time to go to Tyler Hero, but Hero does lead the team in usage with Jimmy Butler off the court, 31.2% usage rate, scores just over 40 fantasy points per 36 minutes. It just kind of becomes a question of how many minutes can we project Tyler Hero for, but there is one other factor here, which is Caleb Martin is questionable to play. And if Martin also sits, then I'd feel a little more comfortable projecting Tyler Hero for like 34 to 36 minutes. That to me would make him a pretty good tournament play. But the guy that I mostly want to get to without Butler, it would be Bam Adebayo. He's a lot more reasonably priced on DraftKings though than he is on FanDuel.
Any other spots you want to get to before we close this one out?
No, I think we could close it out. But also, guys, don't forget, if anything gets added to the injury report, leave a comment below. I do answer those questions later in the day.
Absolutely. And remember, stick around. Locks before lock tonight, a deeper dive, live before lock, all of that starting at 4:30. They got us on a 1 hour deeper dive for 10 games tonight, Greg. You and me, pal.
Oh, there we go. I forgot because I'm doing it with you. A little bit of a shuffling of the schedule. So that'll be good. Guys, check that out. Check out Live Before Lock. And be on the lookout for any other injury news. Any questions at all, leave it in the comment section.